The year is 1845 and you're a mother in rural Ireland. The fields outside your cottage are totally empty and the potatoes have failed again. It's the Great Famine. Your children are hungry and you have nothing. Nothing but your hands and spools of wool. So you sit by the fire, you have your hook in your hand, and you begin to make knots in this wool. Not for fun, not to pass time, but because the lace that you are making might just be your family's next meal. Irish crochet was born out of survival. Crocheters created beauty in the middle of suffering, hope in the middle of hunger. And that's where some of the story of crochet begins. In hardship, in resilience, and in love. Crochet is known to be a cozy craft right now, but its roots, they're fierce. Let's talk about it. Hi everyone, welcome to my very first long form YouTube video. Truthfully, I have no idea what I'm doing and I have a problem looking at the camera still, so please excuse me. I'm using my crochet as an excuse to not have to do that. But my name is Joy and I run a small handmade business with my mom selling floral themed goods, but mostly crochet flowers. I have no idea if anyone is even going to see this video because I'm not telling anybody that I'm posting it, but hi, thanks for being here if you are here with me. One of my favorite things to do when I'm crocheting is to listen to video podcasts on YouTube. So my favorite podcasts are bookish ones, spooky paranormal ones. I like informational, kind of educational history ones, and I really like true crime podcasts. So these craft alongs that I'm going to be doing here on this channel is probably going to be a combination of all of those at some point. I have no idea what to call this podcast or this series of videos. I don't know, stitched and twisted. Maybe not your average podcast. The stitching hour. I have no idea. But for now, I'm just going to call it a craft along and you guys are going to crochet with me while I tell you some interesting things. So really what I'm doing with this video is trying to find a way for me to slow down after a very busy day and try out a new form of art, which is video making, and work on my craft projects at the same time, which are all of my favorite things. So yeah, welcome to this little cozy corner of the internet of mine. I'd love it if you'd subscribe and join me on this little adventure. Grab your favorite beverage, grab your current project that you're working on. We're gonna go into the history of crochet. I kind of fell into a rabbit hole while researching this, so we're gonna go through kind of like the ancient roots of crochet, how it kind of evolved through the years, and how it became the cozy, creative, and sometimes rebellious craft and form of art that we know today. All sources that I'm going to be using in this video will be listed in the description box or something if I can figure out how to use that. So the origins of crochet are a little bit mysterious and I didn't really find an overall consensus about it. Some people say it has ancient origins going back thousands and thousands of years. Some say that Chinese artisans and ancient Egyptians were crocheting long before Europe caught on. Another ancient technique that I saw, and that is often confused with crochet, was from the Vikings, actually. I'm not sure if I'm going to be pronouncing this right. It looks like this on the screen. That's how you spell it. And if I looked it up, it was nullbinding. Nullbinding. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I did Google it before this, but I probably am still saying something wrong. But anyway, it's a really cool technique. It dates back over 1,000 years ago and it involves a single-eyed needle, so not a hook, and loops of yarn to create fabric. It sounds familiar, but it was more along the lines of kind of like sewing in circles, so not quite the crochet that we know. Some textile archaeologists have had to work really hard to actually differentiate between historical fabric fragments that they've found and excavated and null binding or knitting or something else entirely is really difficult to kind of differentiate between. In my research though, there is currently no physical evidence of crochet before the 1700s. Yep, There were no hooks, there were no balls of yarn everywhere, there were no patterns, there were no swatches, nothing. And looking at my workshop right now, there would totally be evidence if it existed before then. So yeah, so where did it come from then? So the most supported theory is that crochet evolved in Europe in the 16th to 18th centuries, and it likely started as an offshoot of other handicrafts, specifically something called tambour embroidery. So tambour embroidery was a technique that came from the East, possibly India, China, or the Middle East, and it made its way all the way to France. So what artisans did was take a fine gauzy fabric and they stretched it over a hoop, kind of like embroidery as we know it now. And they took little tiny hooks. So this is a 5mm hook, but they were like a really tiny hook that could go through that gauze fabric. And they started to go through this gauzy fabric and make tiny little chains through it. Think of it like surface crocheting or surface embroidery on crochet, but really, really teeny tiny. Eventually, someone, somewhere, got the wild idea to ditch the fabric and just continuously create loops. And we think, or at least from my research, this one change may have been the birth of crochet as we know it now. And this probably happened somewhere in France or in Italy in the 18th-ish century. It wasn't called crochet yet, and it definitely wasn't widespread at that time. The French actually called it crochet de l'air, and I'm probably saying that wrong, I am not French. But I believe the translation for that is crochet in the air, because it was done without any kind of backing fabric, right? So just a hook and thread and creating structure literally out of thin air. So if you didn't know, fun fact, the word crochet is actually the French word for hook. So from there, the technique quietly evolved. It wasn't flashy or fancy or anything like that. It was mostly functional. People made edgings for linens, they made small accessories and trims for clothing, but that was pretty much it. Fast forward to the 19th century, thread making became a little bit more industrialized. Cotton thread, specifically, it became widely available and more affordable. So combine that with more leisure time for middle and upper class people, suddenly handcrafts were everywhere. In many other parts of Europe, in particular Ireland, crochet became more than just a domestic pastime, but actually something that was necessary to live. During the Great Potato Famine in the 1840s, Ireland faced starvation and widespread poverty. In response, wealthier women and Irish nuns who brought the craft back from France actually set up relief organizations teaching Irish women how to crochet lace. If you've never seen Irish crochet lace, I'll put a picture up on the screen, but for those who are just listening along, it's a really beautiful and intricate and highly sellable form of crochet that kind of mimic traditional needlepoint lace. So it's a little bit thicker because you're using a crochet hook instead of a needle, but it was still super beautiful and super intricate. And these pieces at the time, they were exported to England, to France, and America, where they were sold in upscale shops. And Queen Victoria was even a fan of this Irish lace and praised it and gave it lots of royal attention. Entire families actually depended on this work. Little girls learned how to crochet almost as soon as they could hold a hook. And unlike other handicrafts, of the time anyway, crochet required very little equipment. Just a hook and some thread. It was portable, affordable, and it was actually kind of empowering. It was in many ways an early example of the handmade economy, which we all know and love. Crochet started appearing in published books and magazines, especially among the Victorian elite. This is where we meet Mademoiselle Riego de la Branchaudière. Again, probably butchered that name, so I am so sorry. I really tried. But anyway, this person was a French-Irish woman who wrote pattern books and is often credited with turning crochet into the structured, formal craft that we know it today. She helped popularize the idea that crochet could be more than a pastime, but also an art. And in her lifetime, it's said that she has published over 100 pattern books. 100 at the time. That's pretty crazy. Now let's get into the 20th century. As most of you know, this was a time of global change with the world wars. So let's start with World War I. In the 1910s, men were conscripted and shipped off to the front lines, and women stepped up in almost all parts of the workforce and in industry. Crochet was quietly there in the background too. It actually became part of the war effort. Patriotic women crocheted socks and hats and bandages for the soldiers who were at war. Magazines published patterns for items like helmet liners and fingerless gloves, all practical things that people would need during the wartime. Red Cross drives actually encouraged people to make warm gear for their troops. And yeah, although knitting often took the spotlight, crochet had its role too. Specifically for items that needed thicker, denser fabric. It became a way for people to be able to contribute. It gave them a way to stay busy and to feel useful during a time that was full of fear and uncertainty. Maybe that's why there's a surge of handcrafts right now. And then came the Great Depression. With money tight and families stretched super thin, people turned to crochet as a necessity again, just like the Great Potato Famine. They used what they had. They often worked with string or even unraveled flour sacks to make things for their family. Resourceful crafters made doilies from old thread, rugs from leftover yarn, and clothing from recycled garments. In World War II, the story is pretty similar, with rationing in full effect and resources limited. Crocheters embraced the make, do, and mend philosophy. Old clothing was usually unraveled to reuse the yarn. Women crocheted practical home goods like dishcloths, slippers, and potholders to replace their worn-out items that were difficult to purchase at the time. Even in those difficult times, though, the artistry never stopped. Crochet became a quiet act of resilience. It was a way to make something beautiful when the world felt destructive and bleak. After the war, the 50s and 60s were an era of atomic, no pun intended, optimism. All those cutesy little ads, those glossy home magazines, and perfectly polished domestic life. Crochet was very much on trend in this time. So if you picture the 1950s housewife in your head, she's probably surrounded by crochet. She's got like her stretched lace doilies on every surface. Maybe she's got beautiful crochet tablecloths for Sunday dinner. Maybe she's got bedspreads or blankets with like beautiful little intricate flowers on them. In this era, crochet was a symbol of pride. It was refined, it was pristine, it was incredibly detailed. Women use crochet and other handcrafts to show off their skill by creating heirloom quality items. Just like the women in this time, the art form started to become boxed in. It was expected to be soft, domestic, maybe even invisible. It stayed mostly in the home, tucked into living rooms and blanket baskets, but thankfully, times changed. Cue lava lamps, flower power, and the 1970s, the counterculture movement shook the world, including the fiber arts world. Crochet went from prim and proper to wild and free, and suddenly it was colorful, it was bold, it was experimental. This was the era of the beloved granny square. Brightly colored vests, jackets, hats, even bikinis were made out of squares stitched together. People were mixing colors like never before. There was orange, there was lime green, hot pink. All of this was in one project, and we still see kind of some of that today. Thankfully, in this era, crochet broke out of its domestic mold. It became part of hippie culture, actually, feminist art, and also DIY fashion. And you can make your own clothes, you can make your own statement pieces. You didn't need a factory or anything like that. You just needed a hook. And for many women, crochet in the 1970s was also about reclaiming their agency. The feminist movement was rising, and while some rejected traditional crafts as symbols of oppression, others really leaned into them and using it as a form of self-expression. This is how I personally see the traditional skill. In my household, I do have more of the quote-unquote traditional women tasks. Like I love cooking, I love to do my crochet and other womanly crafts, but I am a feminist through and through, and so is my husband. And although we do tend to fall in traditional roles, in no way, shape, or form are we a 1950s household, okay? In this era, in the 1960s and 70s, crochet was loud, it was unapologetic, and it was just the beginning of crochet's identity as a tool for cultural commentary. After the hippie era, crochet faded a little bit into the background for the 80s and 90s. In the 2000s, at this point, crochet was still around, but most people now considered it a grandma hobby. It was a bit niche and a little bit quieter, but then two things happened simultaneously that changed that: the internet and the DIY renaissance. Websites like Etsy popped up in the early 2000s, and suddenly people weren't just crocheting in isolation, but they were sharing their creations online. You could sell your handmade scarf, you could trade patterns with people, you could post your latest project for everyone to see. And then came sites like Ravelry. It was a platform specifically built for fiber artists, and it was totally a revolution for this. Ravelry gave crocheters and knitters a searchable, customizable, community-driven space to post patterns, get help, connect. You could track your projects, you can track your yarn stash, although we all know our yarn stashes are a little bit too much. You could look at which hooks you've got, your entire crochet life basically in one place. And even though sites like Ravelry served both knitters and crocheters, it really helped foster a crochet revival, if you will. Crocheters started blogging too at this time. They started sharing tutorials on YouTube, they started making pattern PDFs, they started becoming designers, really. Crocheters were no longer considered grandmas, really, because they couldn't be. They had to be tech savvy, they had to be entrepreneurial. I'm not saying that grandmas aren't entrepreneurial, they probably are. Very strong women grandmas are. But anyway, they were no longer considered boring grandma crafts. You had to be quite tech savvy to be able to post these PDFs and these YouTube tutorials and all that kind of stuff. You had to have like a business mind and spirit, and people started to realize that crocheters were way cooler than people realized. We're pretty cool. In the 2010s, Instagram happened. I'm sure we can all agree that crochet is very visually satisfying. You know, you've got colorful yarn. I know it's ironic that I'm holding white yarn right now, but typically you have colorful yarn, you've got clean stitches, you can make time-lapse videos of a blanket that's coming to life. Pure dopamine right there. Crocheters started building followings on apps like Instagram. They started creating businesses and they started developing their own personal styles. Some major trends in this era were amigurumi, which is the Japanese art of crocheting cute stuffed animals and creatures. That's what I'm doing right now. Other trends were things like wearables. People made bralettes, they made cardigans, crop tops, and runway-worthy dresses sometimes. And modern home decor had a big thing in crochet for a little while, that like people would tapestry crochet, for example, or making cute little baskets for all of their yarn. But literally they would make some home decor that looks straight out of a home lifestyle magazine. Crochet became so big actually that fashion brands started picking it up at this time too. Unfortunately, that even included fast fashion brands. So crochet is actually one of those crafts that are totally impossible to do on a machine. There are too many movements needed to complete a single stitch, too many twisting motions of your hand. That's why you should take a break right now and rest those wrists, because a machine can't do that, so you should not expect yourself to do that straight for like a half an hour or however long this video has gone on for. I have no idea. But anyway, crochet is not possible to do with a machine because there are too many intricate movements needed to complete a single stitch. So you cannot mass produce crochet in the same way you could do like knit garments or something. So if you do see any crochet products, just as a public service announcement, it is always handmade. And if you see it for like $5 or $15 at a big box store, just know that someone, somewhere, was not paid fairly for the amount of time and care that it took to make that. So, just some food for thought. Anyways, crochet wasn't just being consumed at this time, but it was also being taught. So tutorials exploded on YouTube. Millions of people learn crochet from YouTube, myself included, who might have never picked up a hook otherwise. In this time period, crochet also became more inclusive. It was more representative and more human. You started seeing members of the LGBTQ+ community bringing pride and identity to designs, BIPOC people and BIPOC fiber artists getting the long overdue visibility they deserved through these crafts, neurodivergent creators speaking out about how crochet helped them cope or connect and thrive. Gender barriers started breaking down with crochet, which is awesome to see these days, with more men, non-binary, and queer folks proudly crocheting on camera as well. So while Instagram and YouTube really helped with the visibility, I like to think that crochet really exploded, at least in modern times, during the pandemic in 2020 and through TikTok. TikTok made crochet go viral. No pun intended, with the pandemic. Suddenly, there were creators everywhere that were blowing up overnight for time lapses, for their plushie tutorials or yarn store hauls. Hashtags like crochet talk and fiber arts were trending all the time when everybody was cooped up inside. Crochet was and is cool. It's super creative. It's often weird. And truthfully, I think crochet is actually a very personal craft. My last bit here is about crochet in activism and healing. You've probably seen yarn bombing or heard of the term yarn bombing, but yarn bombing is when people cover street signs or benches or trees with really bright crochet pieces, usually granny square pieces as well, because granny squares are beginner friendly and easy to crochet. It's fun, yeah, but oftentimes when things are yarn bombed, it's a political statement. And it's been used to draw attention to things like climate change. It's been used to reclaim public spaces or protest injustice in a creative way, basically. Craftivism, if you will. And that's actually a term, I looked it up. And for many people, maybe even you, definitely me, crochet is actually a form of mental health care. Actually, this small business of mine was started to help my mom with her mental health, and it's really grown into something that has helped mine. Studies have shown that crochet can reduce symptoms of anxiety, calm the nervous system, and offer crocheters a sense of control. It provides rhythm, it encourages presence, and for anyone who has struggled with isolation, grief, or burnout, crochet has made a significant impact. At least for me. Anyways, I have completed a bit of my project here. I hope you got some of yours done too. If you found a piece of yourself in the story of crochet, please consider sharing this video with a friend, maybe liking the video, or leaving a comment in the comment section. I'd really like to hear your story about how you started crocheting, how you got started, maybe what you like about it, what it's helped you through, maybe. And I'm sorry that I struggle with eye contact sometimes, so this is why I'm not looking at the camera, and also I'm reading my notes down here, but please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss my next craft along video. I think I'm gonna do maybe the science of 3D printing next or something else. I don't know. If you have any suggestions, leave them down below. I'm gonna try and do this weekly, but I can't give you any promises. I work and I'm also a full-time grad student, and I'm defending my thesis in August, so I can't make you any promises because things are a little bit busy right now. But I really want to thank you for listening to the very end if you're still here. Thank you for slowing down your day with me, and see you in the next one. Bye.